Tonight on KQED Newsroom, the midterm elections gave Democrats control of the House, while a Justice Department shakeup could threaten the Russia investigation. And as California prepares for a high-profile role on Capitol Hill, we look at what the midterm results mean for the Golden State. Plus, diverse women candidates made history across the country on election night. Hello and welcome to KQED Newsroom. I'm Thuy Vu. We begin with a constitutional debate and immigration. Today, President Trump issued a proclamation to deny asylum to anyone entering the U.S. illegally, a stark reversal of decades of immigration policy. Mr. Trump said the caravan of migrants from Central America, quote, has precipitated a crisis and undermines the integrity of our borders. In a separate move this week, the president forced Attorney General Jeff Sessions to step down and appointed Matthew Whitaker as his replacement. Whitaker has been a vocal critic of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian meddling in U.S. politics. The turn of events raises questions about the fate of the Russia probe. Joining me now to talk about this and more is Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, who comes to us from her San Jose office. Congresswoman Lofgren, nice to have you with us again.
Thank you very much.
You chair the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration. What is your reaction to President Trump's proclamation today denying asylum to people who cross the border illegally? It's a move that is widely viewed as being aimed at the Central American migrant caravan.
Well, first, the president can't make the laws unilaterally. There are specific statutes enacted by the Congress, signed by the president into law, that is contradicted by this executive order. He can't just throw out the Constitution and the law books and make the law up himself. He needs to come to Congress if he wants to change the law. This will be litigated, and I believe he will lose. The laws in great detail provides for how individuals can come, where they can come, how they make their claim for asylum. That must be judged on a one-by-one basis.
But federal law does give the president authority to restrict immigration when it's detrimental to the interests of this country. In the president's view, the U.S. Supreme Court pretty much agreed with that principle when it upheld Mr. Trump's revised travel ban this summer. What actions can you and other Democratic leaders take at this point to counter that, if anything?
Well, there will obviously be litigation on this, but the travel ban is somewhat different than this issue. There is very detailed procedures in the Immigration Act, and they're backed up by international treaties that have been ratified and also bind the United States as to the treatment of people seeking asylum. People need to be treated in an orderly way. Either they win their case or they lose their case. If they lose their case, they can't come in. But to simply try to abrogate the law through executive order is unprecedented and frankly shocking.
Regarding people who lose their case, the White House is making the case that most migrants who seek asylum are eventually denied, but at the same time, they're allowed to stay in the U.S. legally, sometimes for years, while their cases are being adjudicated. How would you address those concerns coming from the White House?
Well, we could speed up the adjudication process. We have repeatedly asked for the appointment of additional immigration judges. And instead of funding the judicial branch, they've just funded more enforcement. So that's a responsibility that the administration can address. But we here in America believe in the rule of law and in due process. And we have had a program that the Trump administration eliminated, where virtually 100%, 99 to 100% of the applicants for asylum showed up for their day in court. If they lose, they have to go home. If they win, under the law, they're permitted to stay. That's the way the law should work, not abrogated by the president.
I would also like to ask you about Daca. On Thursday, a federal appeals court in San Francisco upheld an injunction barring the Trump administration from removing deportation protections for the so-called Dreamers. There are about 700,000 of them in this country. Now that the midterms have given Democrats control of the House, what will you and other Democratic lawmakers do on this issue of Daca?
Well, I think that we ought to provide a permanent protection for these young people who've done nothing wrong, They didn't make a decision to come in most cases. They were brought by their parents as children. They are de facto Americans. They're Americans in every way, but their paperwork. And there's broad support among the American public of all political parties to try and keep these young people who are blameless from being deported. So I hope that we can pass legislation to do that. The president in the past has said that he favored that. So let's see if he can sign a bill that we send him.
Will you offer a path to citizenship for the Dreamers?
I believe that no one should be a permanent underclass in the United States. That hasn't worked well for other countries that do that. But obviously, the length of time that a person would wait until they would have their residence, and then, of course, you have to wait 5 years to apply to become a citizen, all that would be subject to a discussion and hopefully bipartisan negotiation.
Also, another big story this week, Congresswoman Lofgren, the firing of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The president replaced him with Matthew Whitaker. In the past, Mr. Whitaker has criticized not only the Russia investigation, but also the Supreme Court, taking to task its authority to declare legislative and executive acts as unconstitutional. What is your reaction to this move to put Mr. Whitaker in that position?
Well, first, it's unconstitutional. The appointment is unconstitutional. Article 2, Section 2 requires the acting attorney general to be confirmed by the Senate. Mr. Whitaker has not been confirmed and has been pointed out by several scholars. Everything he does in that position would be invalid because his appointment is invalid.
But I think there are rules, though, that the Trump administration is pointing out in a way that allow the president to put Mr. Whitaker in place as an interim person, correct?
They can say what they want. It's not what the Constitution provides. It's not what the statute provides. And it's not what the rules of the Justice Department provide. Further, this guy, his views are out there. He has apparently opined that Marbury versus Madison, really the premier case establishing the role of the Supreme Court in the United States when Thomas Jefferson was entering the White House, that decision should be rethought. That is bizarre.
So what can Democrats do at this point? The Senate widened its majority as a result of the midterms.
Well, you know, there will be litigation if the president doesn't rethink this. You can't have an invalid appointment. You can't just flout the Constitution. So he will pick someone else, I assume, who has been confirmed and quite likely will be someone I don't much care for. But that's the president's decision, not my decision, provided that he follows the rule. The issue here is also the Mueller investigation. We all believe that Mr. Mueller should be permitted to finish this investigation, let the chips fall where they may. Whatever he reports, I'm prepared to accept. Whether it exonerates the president or doesn't, he should just finish the report and let the American public see what it is.
All right, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren joining us from her office in San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that Democrats have gained control of the House, San Francisco Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi appears poised to become House Speaker once again. She says Democratic leaders will focus on infrastructure, controlling prescription drug costs, and changing campaign laws. Meanwhile, in the wake of the mass shooting in Thousand Oaks, Governor-elect Gavin Newsom is once again calling for gun control.
The National Rifle Association, I'll say this, is bankrupt morally. And they need to be held to account to their rhetoric and to their actions.
Here now with a roundup of the midterm election results, I'm joined by our own KQED California Politics and Government team, Senior Editor Scott Schaefer, reporter Marisa Lagos, reporter-producer Guy Marzorati, and joining us via Skype from Sacramento, reporter Katie Orr. Good to have all of you with us.
Good to be here.
So, Scott, let's begin with Nancy Pelosi. During the campaign, she made it a point to put forth a much more modest agenda of things like health care, right? Improving the Affordable Care Act instead of pushing for single-payer health care. Now that the Democrats have a majority in the House, do you expect her to pursue a more liberal agenda?
No. In a word, you know, there will be certainly elements of the caucus that are going to push for that, for impeachment, for really going after Trump. And I think that she's going to want to really bring up issues that are going to bring people together. Things like universal gun control, which is broadly popular in the country. Things like maybe taking care of the Dreamers, Daca. There will be more oversight. You know, the Adam Schiff is going to take over from Devin Nunes on the House Intelligence Committee. So there will be
more subpoenas, more investigations.
More subpoenas, investigation, and protecting the Mueller investigation. But I don't think Pelosi wants to get out in front of that. I think she wants to be able to show that they can govern. And the way you show that is you put forth ideas that are going to be broadly popular. Maybe they don't pass the Senate. Even if they do, they might not get a signature from the president. But at least it gives the country a sense of what the Democrats would do, as opposed to what Trump and the Republicans said they would do, which was open up the borders and abolish ICE and all those things.
And Marisa, how much of this is, do you think, pretty much building the template for the 2020 presidential election?
Well, I think she wants to, as Scott's saying, sort of set a tone that will be helpful to candidates. You know, there's going to be so many people, both in D.C. and throughout the country, who are going to be vying for that Democratic nomination. And I think that, you know, it's going to be up to them to decide what their own messages are. And I think we'll see a similar split. It'll be more candidates, but between what we saw in 2016 with a progressive, you know, left wing, and then folks, I think, trying to hit a more middle centrist ground. But, you know, again, they can only do what they can do in the House as Democrats. And, you know, Pelosi is very good at keeping that caucus together, but it is a diverse caucus as well. And so you're not going to have a majority of people coming in and saying, let's do Medicare for all day one.
Sure. All right. Well, let's move on to our own state here, California, and talk about Governor-elect Gavin Newsom. In light of the Thousand Oaks shooting, Guy, he's been talking about gun control and heavily criticizing the NRA. What can he do realistically now as governor, given that California does have some of the strictest gun control laws in the country already?
Right. I mean, I think, you know, looking forward to the next session, I'll give you two examples of bills that were vetoed by Governor Jerry Brown that I think may have a better chance this time around. One, to stop gun and ammunition sales right here at the Cal Palace. We often have gun shows there. Governor Brown twice vetoed a bill that would have stopped those sales. Another one would be to expand these gun violence restraining orders. Basically, a family member can petition a judge and make sure someone that they think has a mental issue cannot access guns. There was a bill to expand that to a coworker or a teacher would be allowed to make that petition. That was vetoed by the governor. I think maybe this time around that both bills will be reintroduced and might have a different fate with the Governor Newsom.
And he might be going out too and sort of using his bully pulpit to try to push other states to do this. Right. I mean, he is already seen as a national figure, and I think that is something. We've had some of these laws held up in court, but I think there might be these ammunition having to register for ammunition sales. That could be something you could see him trying to take elsewhere.
All right, let me bring in Katie Orr at this point too, because Katie, during the campaign, Gavin Newsom really took every opportunity to attack President Trump, but now he can't just lead the resistance anymore. He needs to lead the state. So what are some of the issues that he will tackle right away, do you think, in addition to gun control?
Right. And he knows that. In his acceptance speech, he said California is not just about resistance, it's about results. During his campaign, he said addressing child poverty is going to be one of his #1 issues. Of course, he's going to have to tackle the housing affordability and homelessness crisis. And he's going to be pretty busy right out the gate.
And Marisa, Newsom campaigned on progressive causes like universal preschool and Medicare for all. And do you think he'll face a lot of tensions between the liberal and more moderate wings of the Democratic Party in the state?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's looking like the Democrats will have a 2/3 majority in both houses. And I was talking to someone who worked for Governor Jerry Brown for many years, who was saying it's actually harder in some ways when you have a supermajority because there are so many people to keep in line. You know, Newsom's going to come in. The first thing he's going to have to do is propose a budget. He does not want to blow up that $9 billion rainy day fund that Jerry Brown has built. I think that we've seen Anthony Rendon, the Speaker of the Assembly, make some overtures. They've disagreed publicly in the past. I think they're all going to try to work together. He's very close with the state Senate leader. So I think in the Assembly, universal health or a universal preschool is a huge issue for Rendon too. In the state Senate, Tony Atkins, the leader there, has been very active on affordable housing. So I think he's going to probably take it slow. I don't think he's going to come in day one again, just like Pelosi, and try to push all of these very liberal, progressive agendas.
And how can we expect Gavin Newsom to be different? Because his campaign slogan was courage for a change. So what will he do that's different from Jerry Brown, both in style and substance?
Well, I think Guy mentioned one, which is gun control. I think, Jerry Brown was sort of known for paddle once on the right, once on the left. I think you'll see Newsom maybe twice on the left, once on the right, twice on the left. I think you'll see certainly childhood poverty issues and preschool education, housing. I think you're going to see him step back from high-speed rail in some way. I think maybe less of the cap and trade money will go to high-speed rail than it has been. And then there's the tunnels question, which Jerry Brown has really been pushing, the water tunnels in the Delta. You know, I'm not sure he's going to want to try to push Jerry Brown's legacy forward so much as create his own legacy. And I think he's going to lean in on things that, you know, Jerry Brown has never been a big advocate of thinking that government can solve problems like poverty or income inequality. And Gavin Newsom, I think, is going to lean in on those things.
And I think that speaks to their different life experiences. You know, Jerry Brown has never had children, has never really wanted for much. He has had, like, I don't think he cares about money that much, but he's never had to worry about it. And Newsom, although he does have, you know, a father who was very well connected, grew up in a single family home with his mom, and I think that...
And he has 4 children.
And he has 4 children. And so I just think his sort of, the way he will approach these things as a father and given his sort of life experience will be very different.
All right, let me move on to the propositions because I want to make sure we have time for that discussion as well. There were a number of propositions on the state ballot having to do with housing. 2 measures that would raise billions for affordable housing passed, but yet voters rejected a measure to expand rent control. What does this tell us about the mindset of voters?
Rejected by a huge margin. I think housing still remains very important to California voters. We see that in polling. We even see support for rent control in polling. This particular measure, Proposition 10, as you mentioned, it lost, only passed in 1 county, San Francisco, in the entire state. I think it had a message that, you know, the rent is too damn high, and that's an issue that progressives care about. It didn't have the money. It was outspent 3-1, and it didn't have a real coalition. You know, there wasn't the party support, big elected official support. Organized labor gave some money, but not a lot. And so in the end, I think that really added up for a resounding defeat that I think will have implications for next year, because I'm not sure now that the, you know, landlords, the apartment association really has that much incentive to make a deal around rent control, considering how well they did in this campaign.
Yeah. And also voters rejected Prop 5 as well, which would have allowed older homeowners to take their lower property taxes with them when they move. Katie, what happens now with the housing debate? How will this move forward in the state now that we have a new governor, Governor Newsom, and are other state lawmakers going to step up on this issue as well?
You know, I think it's interesting. I feel like Governor Jerry Brown got flack a lot of the time for not making affordable housing more of an issue while he was in office this second time around. I think we're at the point now where that's simply not a choice that politicians can make anymore. The affordability crisis has spread to, you know, most parts of the state. The redevelopment agencies that used to be a part of funding for affordable housing have gone away a long time ago, and there hasn't really been a new funding source established to make that. So I think you might see some movement along those lines, creating a new source for affordable housing. Also, you have to look at maybe streamlining some of the environmental regulations which can hold up projects. And of course, you have to deal with the NIMBY issues, right? Once people have their house, sometimes they're not exactly excited to allow for a big development close to where they are. These are all challenges that Newsom is going to have to take into consideration.
All right, Scott, let's talk real quickly also about the congressional races, right? There were 7 districts in California that Democrats were hoping to flip from red to blue. What is the update on that? Yeah,
going into the election, Republicans held 14 of the 53 seats. They've lost 2. The Darrell Issa seat flipped to blue, and also the one held by Steve Knight in northern LA County. Katie Hill defeated him. There's another one down in Orange County, the Dana Rohrabacher seat, that's leaning toward the Democrat in that. Then there's 3 that are kind of a toss-up. 2 of them are in Orange County, one of them over in Modesto, Jeff Denham's seat. Very, very close, 1,300 votes between them and tens of thousands of ballots still to count. So really up in the air. All right. Well, thank you all. You guys have been doing wonderful work this week, and go get some rest this weekend. Scott Schaefer, Marisa Lagos, Guy Marzorati, and Katie Orr in Sacramento. Thanks to all of you. Now to another much talked about aspect of the midterms, the many women who ran for office this year. Here in California, first-time candidate Katie Hill flipped a traditionally red congressional district to blue. Nationwide, more than 120 women have won so far. Among the many firsts, the first 2 Native American women elected to Congress, the first woman senator from Tennessee, the first female governor of Maine. And Ayanna Pressley became the first African American to represent Massachusetts in Congress.
When it comes to women of color candidates, folks don't just talk about a glass ceiling. What they describe is a concrete one. But you know what breaks through concrete? seismic shifts.
And here now with me to talk about the wave of women in politics are Amanda Renteria with Emerge America, a national organization that trains Democratic women who want to run for office, and Ann Moses with Ignite, a nonpartisan group that trains young women for the political world. Good to have both of you here.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Amanda, the women who ran for office were very diverse. We had African-American women, Latina, Asian, Native American. Some had military backgrounds. Did they have certain campaign themes in common, though?
You know, when we look across the women that ran, I think one key really message folks had is they're bringing a new perspective. So you saw women really talking about who they were. You know, whether it was the fighter pilot, right, or whether it was the reason why they personally got engaged. What we saw across the board is women coming to the table with their own stories, who they genuinely and authentically were, and what fired them up to be there. You know, for some it was healthcare. For some it was their perspective that they were going to bring into these roles.
And what made them more comfortable with telling their own stories now instead of sticking to the resume, you know, as we've seen in prior elections?
Yeah, and I think there's been this whole discourse of we need to start getting to a new place of politics. And I think after the 2016 election, people really did look inside themselves and say, how can I be a part of now changing the culture of the conversation or changing the leadership of our country? And women stepped up all around the board, and largely because there are some great organizations out there who are really trying to help women tell their story, run for office, step up and be out there.
And one of those organizations, of course, is Ignite, and Moses with that group. And I know you're training women from a very young age, high school, all the way up to their early 20s. You're now even starting younger.
Yeah.
Moving forward, do you see that a new wave of young women will be inspired by this and we'll see more of them running for office? I'm thinking in particular about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. She's Latina, 29 years old, youngest woman ever elected to Congress.
Yeah, what we're seeing at Ignite was that post-2016, so pre-2016, what we saw was that young women were really driven by the issues. They cared about issues in their communities. They wanted to make change around those issues. And you really had to convince them, though, that that desire and that passion and all that work they were already doing, that they should take that and run for office and be in the place of power where they can actually make the decisions. That was a big push to convince them that they could do it. After 2016, they realized they could do it. They realized they didn't have a choice but to do it. They got out there. They saw if they ever questioned who was going to vote for me, they got out there at marches and looked around and realized this is who's going to vote for me. And that barrier kind of went away. And so what we've seen at Ignite is extraordinary political activism, demand that is literally 10 times what we saw prior to 2016.
Really? Just in the last 2 years?
Just in the last 2 years, we are racing to keep up with demand. We went from being in 4 states to being in 20 states in 2 years. And even since, in the 3 days since the election, my staff is now receiving calls from women in Florida, women in Arkansas, women all over the country. We just got a call from someone in Panama who want to get involved.
And what are the top concerns you're hearing from these young people as to why they want to run and be involved?
Everyone brings, as Amanda said, their own personal take on it. You know, it's the issue that is personal to you. So we have a young woman who we've known since she was 14, and she's about to graduate from Berkeley, and she's now on the Commission for Women and Girls in Oakland, appointed by the mayor. And for her brother was killed when she was in high school in a drive-by. So for her, the issue is gun violence, and that's the issue that's driving her. You know, we have young women for whom the issue is access to reproductive rights. We have a lot of young women for whom the issue is immigration.
So very, very personal, like Amanda was saying.
Yeah, it's what drives them.
And amid the victories nationwide, right, and there were many, there were also some big losses. There were some high-profile losses, including Senators Claire McCaskill of Missouri and Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. What does this tell you?
You know, I think, you know, there was an article out about is red getting redder and is blue getting bluer. You know, I think right now what we're seeing is there is a whole new generation of folks who are engaged and who are really, I mean, no one expected at the very beginning we'd be talking about Stacey Abrams right now and what's happening in Georgia. No one expected Gillum. And so I think some of that is not just about a party question, but about is there a time for new faces that really aren't affiliated with Democrat or Republican, and really the space in between that seems to be being filled by a lot more young people coming at politics from a different kind of angle.
One of the reasons we're nonpartisan is that young people are registering in droves as decline to state. They don't necessarily affiliate with a party, and even if they do, they don't feel 100% affiliated with it, and they're really kind of issue to issue. And
do they feel like they would want a new party, or they just don't want to be part of a party at all, like the Green Party or any other party?
They really feel like they just want to. They want to be authentically who they are, and maybe they go this way on immigration and that way on healthcare, and they want to stand up for the issues they believe in. They don't feel particularly represented by parties at this point, and I think that's a great thing because they can run as they are, authentically as they are, and for young women in particular, their first race is more likely to be a local race, and
like
those are
or a board of education,
or a city council race. These are nonpartisan races anyway. So why do you need to, affiliate yourself with that? You should just go forward and do it.
And Amanda, I want to talk to you also about California's influence nationally, right? We have now the Democratic majority in the House. Nancy Pelosi is expected to again become Speaker, the first woman to hold that post. Maxine Waters would chair the Financial Service Committee. How will California's power and interests be reflected in Washington?
I think when you start to see that in the state of California, it's not just someone breaking through and becoming a first. Right now, all of a sudden, you're seeing a lot more women at the table. And certainly when I worked on the Hill for the first woman elected from Michigan, we were really fighting to get maternity care within the Affordable Care Act. And there was 4 women on the committee. Today, you can imagine that conversation happening, and you now have 6, 7, right? All of a sudden, the chorus is a little louder, and I think what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years is what does that mean for governing now? What issues rise to the top, and how are coalitions being built with the new voices that are coming?
All right, Amanda Renteria with Emerge America, and also Ann Moses with Ignite. Nice to have both of you here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And that will do it for us. As always, you can find more of our coverage at kqed.org/newsroom, including the latest on the California wildfires. I'm Thuy Vu. Thank you for joining us.